Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris. His name's Craig. By the way, if anybody out there wants to give me a contract to do anything, let's be honest. Murder for hire. I don't care. All right. I will take deferred payments as long as I get the money in the end. Deferred payments is the new way to do things. Ben Charrington, it's time for you to go into Bob Nutting's office, knock on the door, walk out in and be like, Bob, we can get anybody we want to. How are we going to do that? We're just going to give them monster contracts in which they don't get the money until after you sell the team. Get ready for your on-paper Pittsburgh Pirates $300 million payroll that only costs Bob Nutting about $40 million a year for the next 10 years. Do it, Ben. Do it.
It's the goofiest thing, Chris. And I did see in the beginning, they were talking about, like, it was like the majority of it is going to be deferred payments. And I'm like, majority? I'm like, and I was thinking, I was thinking
68 million out of every $70 million given out every year. It's $2 million a year for 10 years for Ohtani. And then the next 10 years, it's $68 million a year. Like, I know that payroll's going to go up in the next 10 years, so that's going to absorb it a little bit, right? Like, $68 million 10 years from now, as crazy as it sounds, folks, $68 million will probably be a little bit easier for a team to swallow than it is right now. It's still going to be a big chunk of change, but it is the craziest contract I've ever seen. And I've seen the rule in the MLB rulebook, and they actually have it written in there. You can defer as much money as you want to without any limit whatsoever in these contracts. I bet you that changes very soon.
yeah. And I think that when they were saying, like, I did see the rule as well, Chris, and it was saying like limitless. People were probably thinking, oh, they're going to take, like, I don't know, half of it and move it on. I mean, they weren't anywhere thinking that this was going to be a possibility, because you could even see some of the national media people who have flipped and flopped this, like, entire past week on how they feel about everything. You know, from Ken Rosenthal whining at the winter meetings to praising the now David and Goliath situations that are going to exist because of the Dodgers, and praising the Dodgers and Ohtani. I mean, it's just weird that they're just kind of trying to think about how to explain this and how it's a good thing. And they have to be thinking, this is absolutely ludicrous. This is crazy.
I also think that the most interesting aspect of the Ohtani thing that happened last week was the way that Ohtani's agent burned so many bridges but didn't care, because the amount of money that he got for his client is enough that he never has to worry again about money, even the agent, right? The representation, the team that's around Ohtani floats out there to JP Morosi, John Morosi, MLB Network. They basically tell him, like, hey, he's going to Toronto, right? They get him to go and tweet that thing. There's a plane that sits on a tarmac and flies out to Toronto. I'm completely convinced this is all orchestrated. Like, that was part of it, right? Like, he probably hired the plane or got somebody to go fly the plane there who was in on the whole thing. Like, that was orchestrated. Yusuke Kikuchi rents out the most expensive sushi restaurant in Toronto for the night. Don't tell me that this wasn't all planned. And then what do the Dodgers do? They panic, have a meeting on Friday night, that night, worried they've lost Ohtani and offer this ridiculous deal, and he immediately signs. And it goes back to the idea that, one, if you don't care about the bridges burned, because right now I don't think any baseball reporter would ever trust anything that came out of that group again, but it doesn't really matter. He signed for 10 years and $70 million a year. So you don't need those people anymore to do what you did. And he got his guy. Those pulling the strings got their guy exactly where he wanted to be. I'm always taken aback with when free agency begins, how the reporters and those that cover it and the prognosticators will twist everything around to all of a sudden there's 10 or 12 possibilities. When if you just remember what the player or the player's agent has said leading up to free agency, it's sometimes so clear where they're going to end up. I use the example of Zach Wheeler. His fiance wanted to live in Philly. He turned down more money to be in Philly. I use the example of Manny Machado a few years ago. He comes into free agency, and in October, beginning that free agency, 10 years, $300 million. He was just being said as loud as possible by his camp. He sat around and let every team in the world offer him every deal possible. The first team that gave 10 years and $300 million guaranteed, he signed right then and there. It was already there. The idea that anybody thought it wasn't going to end up the way that they had stated it was going to end up is shocking to me. And Ohtani wanted to be on the West Coast. I mean, he went to the Angels originally because he wanted to be in that market. Why would he have changed his mind and gone to Toronto? Why would he have changed his mind and gone to the Cubs, which was one of the other ones I saw, or some of these other teams that were like, oh, we're in on Ohtani too? No, you're not. Have you ever flown across the Pacific Ocean? It sucks. I've done it before. It takes forever. You don't add hours onto that. The man has a beautiful home out in Hawaii. It's 4 hours from LAX to get there. It could be 9 from Toronto. Why would you do that? What's the point of having all the money if you never get to go to the house you built in Hawaii? So to me, it seemed really obvious he was going to get to LA, and they did a really good job of making people think that, well, he could go anywhere so they could get that kind of a deal signed.
Yeah, and I mean it's business, and we all knew. I mean, I had like maybe the Dodgers or the Yankees in there. I did the Toronto thing. I never really saw. I mean, they do have some money. The Cubs are going to be spending money, and I feel like some teams just kind of want to be mentioned to a degree, like in those types of stories to have their name involved in that. But yeah, like we said, Chris, the biggest thing for me was this whole time as this whole thing is like unfurling. I was doing a lot of driving this past weekend, so I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, reading up on a lot of stuff while the wife is driving and different stuff. And I was like, about a week ago, people were going after Ken Rosenthal and Morosi and Bob Knight, whoever it may be, and saying, leave Ohtani alone. He wants this to be secret. He wants this to be whatever. And the only team that actually spoke this into the world was the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And he signed with the Dodgers. So basically, like, it's like, who do you want your bad guy to be? Well, it's not going to be Ohtani. And I'm not even asking for it to be Ohtani. Ohtani is one of the best baseball players pretty much to ever play the game. I mean, and he does something and hopefully continues to do something. We don't know.
If he keeps doing what he's doing for the next 10 years, he'll be greater than Babe Ruth. Yeah. Because I've always said Babe Ruth is the greatest because Babe Ruth was a superstar pitcher for 10 years before he went out and hit home runs when nobody hit home runs.
Yeah.
In his era, okay, comparatively, I always find it funny when somebody says anybody else is a greater baseball player, like Barry Bonds, like great baseball player. Well, yeah, he was on horse steroids at the end. His head was 3 sizes too big, like the Grinch's heart at the end when the Who's all hugged him. But he still couldn't pitch. He couldn't go out there at a high level and do it. Shohei Ohtani is the modern day Babe Ruth, and deep down in the end, if he does it consistently for a long enough amount of time, you could sit there and say Shohei Ohtani is the greatest baseball player to ever live. You may be watching a player right now in Shohei Ohtani that 150 years from now, baseball fans will sit there and say, who is the greatest ever? And some guy's going to sit there and say, I don't know how you pick anybody except Shohei Ohtani, and pulls up all of his stats. It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out, and he will do the majority of it now. If he does become that, it will be for the Los Angeles Dodgers. God, does it suck to be an Angels fan right now? Think about that. You had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. You got nothing accomplished with it. And then Shohei goes right across town and just plays at Chavez Ravine for the next 10 years. Oh, to be an Angels fan, I would quit watching that team and start watching a completely different sport. That's got to be brutal for them right now.
Dude, did you see like how quickly they took down his marquee? Like
I'm surprised they didn't light it on fire.
I know,
they had
but
it
it
down
was like
within
it was
an
like
hour.
it was like announced, and like within the hour, it is like gone. And I'm like,
I mean, I'm surprised that they didn't fire gasoline up there with a hose and light it on fire. I mean, what a slap in the face that is. It's crazy. On the other hand, Ben Cherington, I mean, what the heck, man? Why couldn't you have given him $3 million a year and deferred $67 million over the next 10? You could have beaten the Dodgers offer and he could be a Pittsburgh Pirate today. I know that's ridiculous. I'm just joking.
Here's the crazy part is, Chris, is that at that point in time, MLB would step in. There's certain teams,
they'd be
and
like,
we all know
hold
this.
on.
We all know that there's
you're
certain
right.
teams that they would step in on. They'd be like, we can't let the Pirates do this. If we let the Dodgers do this, it'd be like, it's okay. But if the Pirates do this, oh, no, there's no way. Like, because they're not going to pay it.
Major League Baseball wanted the Dodgers to get Shohei Ohtani. Major League Baseball is totally okay with the way that contract went down. And for those that are worried that they're all going to be like this, Bryce Harper was offered several deals, if I'm not mistaken, and he's talked about it publicly with these big, giant deferred money things, and he turned down the deferred money thing. Because in the end, it's not worth as much money. If Shohei gets the whole 70 and can invest it, he would have a lot more money later on down the line. Like, he's going to get a ton of endorsement deals in LA, so in the end, it may make sense for him to take that kind of deal in Los Angeles, right? Because what people don't understand is, on the other side of the Pacific, they don't know a lot of sports teams. Like, I always give you the example of when I went to Sydney, Australia. I actually went all up and down the coast 5-6 years ago. And they only had about 4 or 5 baseball teams that you ever saw their hats, that you ever saw in stores. That was it. They don't know about the majority of them. In fact, they really don't even watch the game, right? But there's certain stars that are marketable. He's so marketable, and even more so being on the West Coast. Even though he's making $2 million a year, he will make so much more in his endorsements, and then he'll get that other stuff on the back end. I don't want to talk about him the whole show. This is Bucs in the basement. We're 12 minutes in here. Well, let's get to the exciting moves that the Pirates are making. Marco Gonzales is a Pittsburgh Pirate. How much are we paying this guy this year?
We are paying him a total of $3 million, and
great move.
That is due to the fact that he has a trade assignment that is like for, I think it's like 250, thousand or whatever it is, or it would have only been 2.75 million. The Braves are, I guess they're becoming like professional like money launderers or something. I don't know what they're doing at this point in time.
It's like watching an episode of Pawn Stars.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we'll take your contract, but we'll give it to this contract and we'll pay a part of that, but we don't even really want this guy. It's for the Pirates.
They've moved so many guys. They have moved so many guys over the last couple of days. They moved Max Stassi. Or Stasi. Yeah. They moved him through their system. They moved Evan White. Evan White got moved through the system. They're acquiring players and then just moving them, and they're absorbing all this. I don't know what's going on with this. There's something weird happening with the way that money is going through Atlanta right now. But the Pirates get a good pitcher. $15 million option next year. I don't think that you're picking that up. Although, I mean, if he all of a sudden becomes a superstar, he's had 1 or 2 really good years. You could make the argument. But I just don't think this team's ever going to invest $15 million in a pitcher. So it is weird to me that it's just a 1-year deal, but you have so many holes in your rotation. You got to start filling them. This opportunity comes along to get a Marco Gonzales for a year at $3 million. You take that. That's a bargain.
Yeah, and I mean, you're basically paying him. This is like the Vince Velasquez contract with a potential option, which, I mean, Pirates fans don't want to hear this, but they could make it a little bit sweeter of a deal if they are going to trade him, or if they end up trading him, at the trade deadline, because a lot of times it's that rental player. But some of these teams that you're trading with, if you tell them the guy's got a $15 million option, they might be like, hey, look what the market is like this year. You've got, Kenta Maeda making $12 million, Kyle Gibson making $12 million. And if Marco Gonzales comes back from his injury and you're thinking you could have him for another year for $15 million, I mean, that could kind of sweeten the pot. Let's let future Craig and future Chris worry about the option piece of it. Right now, people are focusing a lot more on the type of injury he had. It's the anterior interocerosis nerve. It's a nerve in the forearm. There's been about two other players that have had this procedure within the last 10 years. One guy had it it's Brendan Morrow. People remember I think he was a reliever or something for the Cubs at some point in time. So if people are Pirates fans, that you might recognize him. The other guy was, a guy for the Giants. They both have come back, and neither one of them were, to the level of Marco Gonzales. And they kind of became, especially Brendan Morrow, like a pretty legitimate, good to decent reliever. But it's not like everybody thinks it's like, well, since not everybody's had this, or since he's had this, he's not going to be able to come back and work out. I couldn't see him getting traded and then getting traded again and not having all of those medicals out there, that there would at least be some, reassurance or some confidence that he's at least going to be able to pitch. I can't guarantee that because, as a lot of people know, we signed Harley and Garcia last year. He got a nerve injury, couldn't pick up a ball for the rest of the year, and we paid him for the entire year. Obviously didn't pick up his option, but $3 million, like at the price,
you take a chance.
Yeah, the price of the market is right now, like $3 million for a guy who as 4 or 5 back in
right.
rotation.
If he can pitch, I was just going to say that if he can pitch, he's a 4. Okay, if he just goes out there and he pitches and he's able to just and the injury is something he's recovered from, he's a 4. He with the potential, okay, at times in his life to be a guy who's as high as a 2 in your rotation. Okay, but let's say realistically he's a 4. I mean, right now the Pirates have a 2, a 4, and 3 5s in their rotation. They don't really have an ace. But with the way that they're going to spend money, they are never going to have an ace unless it's homegrown. Like they need Keller to become a 1 from where he probably is right now, which is a 2. Okay, on most teams. In fact, some rotations would have him as a 3. All right, let's be realistic when we're comparing him to other rotations where he would actually sit. All right, he has the potential to eventually be a 1, but that's what you have right now. And then you got a 4 and you got a bunch of 5. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done, but you have a legitimate pitcher in your rotation now in Marco Gonzales, as long as he can go out there and he can take the bump every 5 days. If that happens at $3 million, it's a great deal.
Yeah. And like I said, it just can't end here. And I think that's what we all kind of agree on when you're saying that there are some question marks surrounding this. So it's not like that slam dunk guarantee. And I think that that's kind of what Pirates fans are looking for at this point in time. And I kind of don't blame them, that you want, a guy that doesn't have even a little bit of an inkling. But as you see with like a Johan Oviedo towards the end of the year, I mean, Johan Oviedo is shoving in his last few starts. I mean, he did wear down a little bit in the final one or whatever, but there was no thing that, he's going to need, Tommy John surgery at any point in time. So, I mean, pitchers' arms are just so freaking weird. So you don't know that, but yeah, I kind of get that. But yeah, $3 million, you jump on this. The return for the Pirates is either cash considerations or a player to be named later. I had mentioned this, Chris, on the minor league news and brews that came out on Saturday, just when I was like talking through my own thoughts. Is a lot of people were mentioning that, the Pirates didn't select anybody in the Rule 5 draft. And I'm just reiterating this to anybody that didn't hear that from me, is that, it was out there that it was likely that the Pirates were going to trade that person to the Braves to complete that trade. And I'm like, well, that's not really likely at all to me. And in my mind whatsoever, you can, I would like to hear a rebuttal from somebody, just because nobody's really rebutted that. Because when I say, okay, you're going to draft somebody for the Braves, who then the Braves are going to have to keep on their 26-man roster for the whole season. When you look outside of the bubble that is Pittsburgh, the Braves have traded away 2 potential starters already in Mike Soroka and Schuster to the White Sox. If they can't find a spot on their 26-man for them, they're going to find a spot for a guy from the Rule 5 draft. Like that to me, like is, and this came out of people that were at the winter meetings, and I feel like that, when you get yourself absorbed into that type of situation, everything revolves around what's going on there. If you take a step back and look at it, there would be no reason for the Braves to want us to pick anybody in the Rule 5 draft for them. They don't want people from the Rule 5 draft. They're not at the point in their, organization or where they're at building a team. If they can't find spots for these guys, they're not going to find a spot for, you know, a
They
Rule 5
have a
team.
very good team, and they have a higher level of talent, and players that make the 40-man roster don't make the Braves 40-man roster. Like players on the Pirates that would make the Pirates 40-man roster, they don't have room for. They're at a higher level. And players on the Pirates 26-man roster at the start of the year, some of them would not make the Braves 26-man roster. And it's just they're at a higher level in their development, where they're at as a franchise, where they're at with the talent that they have on their roster. They're a goal to get to their level. You're not at that yet. So I think when you look at the Braves, if you look at them through the prism like all these teams are equal, you can be very confused. You have to look at what they actually are.
If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow at Shop Yins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins, by a Yinzer.
Now, to get to where we need to be, we need to add more players. Okay, what is this? What are we looking at here at first base?
Basically, it came out a report from Cleveland.com, an actual, reputable source. Like I said, I was doing a lot of driving, so I also listened to the Baseball Insiders with Robert Murray, who's a guy that's, pretty tuned into everything. And he even mentioned that this was, something that probably took place. There wasn't a whole lot of legs to it because, what you have to understand is there's a difference between, a GM like Ben Cherington going to a team and saying, hey, what's the availability on, would you guys be interested in trading? Would you be up for trading Josh Naylor? Or is that something you would even consider? Just because they're looking at a guy who has not only this year in arbitration, estimated to be around like $7.2 million, also has another year of arbitration left, and is a fairly good young player, only 26 years old. He hit over 308 last year. I think he had like something like 17, 18 home runs. Why wouldn't you check on a guy like that? But the other side is that, Robert Murray had said, like, it's the difference is they're not shopping him. Like a lot of people jumped to the conclusion and wrote some stuff that I saw out there from, Pirates fans and other Pirates bloggers and different stuff that basically said, trade on the table. And I'm like, there's nothing on the table. Ben Cherington did something smart. He's doing his due diligence to try to fill these holes in different ways. We've seen like an estimate for Carlos Santana coming back. Jason Mackey had written he'd seen somewhere around like $7.5 million as an estimate for Carlos Santana. I wouldn't mind that. Carlos Santana did good for us last year, but if you could, as Ben Cherington, go out and get a younger player who has some control, why wouldn't you look into that? I could see them making calls to a decent amount of teams concerning that. This just happened to be something, that was reported.
Well, that's the thing. A good general manager in the position that Ben Cherington is currently in, and there's 2 things that you have to remember about the position that he's in. He's in the position, 1, where he has a cheap owner, and so he has to work within those constraints, and he wants to improve his team. And 2, he's got an awful lot of capital when it comes to prospects and players that other teams may need. So it's very similar, like, just to put it on just a different level. It's very similar to how I'm running my Dynasty Fantasy Baseball League right now. You just saw me pull off a trade in the league that we're in, right? I looked at my team and I said, I honestly looked at my team and I said, it's a 10-team league, Dynasty League. You get to keep everybody you want to that's on your 40-man roster and only 4 guys that are 30 years old or older every year. So that's how older guys get shaken loose and you see trades and people are trying to move veterans and whatever. Don't want to bore you with this. But the idea is I looked at my team and I said, Jonathan India is not good enough at second base for my team. I need to find something better than Jonathan India going into the year on my fantasy team. And then I looked at all these other teams that are out there and teams that I specifically went and looked at where are the top 5 or top 6 or 7 second basemen in that league. Now, what teams that have those players need something that I have? I'm deep at this position. I'm deep at this position. I'm deep at this position. Now it's time to knock on the door and say, hey, I want this guy. This is what I can offer. Here's an initial offer. Let's start talking, right? And I got turned down right away. The guy that had Mookie Betts, who's going to be a second baseman this year, laughed at me, and he should, because Mookie Betts is going to be like the best second baseman in fantasy baseball by far. You're moving Mookie Betts to second base like the Dodgers are doing. It's insane. But I mean, like, I knocked on a few doors, and in the end, I got rejected by 2 teams. I had one team that kept going back and forth, and their price tag was too high. And then all of a sudden, the guy that had Jose Altuve sent me back a counteroffer, and I said, yep, and I made the move. And I know that simplifies it because they're not playing fantasy baseball, right? There's a lot more involved. There's contracts involved. There's money involved. There's more of a factor when it comes into how you're going to make the pieces fit and where teams are and their long-term plans and their short-term plans. But the basics are, you need a first baseman. Ben Cherington can see it. I can see it. Anybody that looks at a depth chart can see. They need a first baseman. And it'd be better to go in a direction where you can find a guy who you're going to have for a couple of years who's younger, who you may decide that you want to extend later on, and you want to give a bigger contract if it works out, than to go and continuously get these 1-year-old first basemen that are hanging on and have them keep coming in on these 1-year deals. So, of course, he's going to go knock on those doors. He's got to find somebody, though, that says, yeah, you're right. You do have something we need. Yeah, you're right. We are looking for prospects there because our window isn't open yet. Or we just don't, we have somebody else that's right behind him that we think gives us a lot of ability. You look at some of the trades right now, these big starting pitchers that are out there. Some of the teams that are floating guys like, Tyler Glasnow or Dylan Cease or something like that. Those teams, some of them are asking for players that are at AAA level or got their cup of coffee last year in the majors because they want to make a quick flip. And some of them are asking for long-term high-end prospects because they're 3 years away. So Ben Cherington has to say, all right, what are you looking for? Where are you at? Now I look at my pool of players. Do I have a match? Here's what I have. And then those discussions go back and forth, and you're hoping that they may not even have thought about dealing that guy, and you're able to give them an offer they can't refuse. That's how you make trades.
Yeah, and that's like the state of baseball right now. And like you said, if you're banking on Carlos Santana having another year like he had last year, I mean the odds would say that's not in your favor. A guy that's aging, and I'm not saying he won't have that, but the odds of him doing that it's greatly decreased. He had the best year he's had since 2019.
No, he'll be down next year. He'll be down next year. He's going to come crashing back to earth. I wouldn't want him.
Yeah.
I think it's a step back. I'm sorry. I think it's a step back. He is like the, if we can't find anything else option, that Ben Cherington would then do that and like cross his fingers and hope it works out. I would much rather them sit there and say, okay, and here's the problem. They don't have what the Orioles want, right? But if you look at Heston Kjerstad, who's sitting there, like that's the kind of player that I'd be trying to target if I were Ben Cherington.
Yeah.
Here's a guy, they've got a lot of outfield prospects in Baltimore, let's say, right? Kjerstad plays corner outfield and first base. People think eventually he ends up a first baseman. He's not even the best outfield prospect that they have, and they're inundated with prospects. If you had a package that the Orioles felt like it benefited them in either the long term because they're trying to spread out arrival dates for prospects, and they work under an owner as well that is going to be cheap, right? That would rather deal in prospects and capital instead of dealing in money. So that may work out. If you had something they needed, you'd want to target that guy because even though he's unproven, he's better than any other option you have at first base. He has control. And that's where I'd rather go and make a deal like that than go get a guy like Carlos Santana. At this point where the Pirates are, I'd rather go do something like that. The problem then becomes, though, do you have what the Orioles want? And do your scouts feel that this guy, who's a really high-end prospect, is going to work out in that position, and is it worth what they're asking to give up? But at some point, you're going to have to break some eggs to make an omelet, because you can't just go out and buy players with Bob Nutting as your owner. So teams like the Orioles, who have the same kind of deal going on with them, that's where you go and you knock on their door and say, hey, we're poor, you're poor, both of our owners suck. We have this, you have that. You want to make a deal? Like, if I'm Ben Cherington, I'm making those phone calls for sure.
Yeah, and he should be looking at all of this type of stuff. And I mean, Ben Cherington is, I think we talked about last week, has come out and said he's trying every avenue. They're looking at every single pitcher. They're probably talking to, I mean, they talk to these GMs all the time. I like we said, we always refer to Moneyball, but it is like not maybe exactly what happens, but it's a guy where, Brad Pitt walks in there, Billy Beane, and it's like, okay, I want this guy. Nah, we're not going to give you that guy. He's like, well, we can come back to that. What about this? Do you know what I mean? You're trying to feel off the other owners. You're trying to feel off what their needs are. What
in
they're
a
willing to
movie,
give
it's
up.
quick.
Yeah.
Right. In a movie, it's quick. In a movie, it's quick because they're trying to do quick dialogue. It probably takes, it's more nuanced, it's longer discussions, it's back and forth kind of proposals. It's probably something more along those lines. But I mean, look, with my fantasy baseball dynasty team, I have a spreadsheet with my entire group lined up. I know all of their current ages as of March 1st of every year, so I know how many more years of control I have of them. I have a depth chart where I'm looking at prospects saying, well, when this guy ages out, will this guy be ready by then? And when somebody approaches me with a trade, I pull up my little chart and I go, what's the value of that player and can I give him up? If I'm doing that, it's something that I make no money at whatsoever. It just takes up time and productivity from me and probably cost me money to play, to waste my time on it when I should be playing with my children. I would think Ben Cherington has a much more intricate system. And when somebody calls him up, he's like, you need a what? We got this guy right here. You don't like him? Well, I can give you this guy instead. He probably can bring it up right away. And I'm sure all these GMs can bring it up right away. Okay? So I think it's a little different than the movie, but I also think that they all know where the value is and who the guy. I mean, I have 4 or 5 guys marked down right now that when we get to our winter meetings that I know have value, but I'm willing to move. I have them color-coded. So that when somebody says, well, I'm looking for a prospect, I can give you this guy and this guy. Like, I know exactly what I'll move and what I'm afraid to move. Okay? And if I'm doing that in my thing that I'm doing for fun that's stupid, God, I hope the general manager of the Pirates is doing that. Right?
I hope so, Chris. He has to.
I hope so. Otherwise, call me, Ben. I will come in and make you a spreadsheet. It's on Excel. It's real simple. I'll teach you how to do it. All right? If you don't have Excel, we'll get it downloaded for you.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say